Tinny from Mini Bowl Design, and today I've been getting a bunch of emails, so I thought I'd make a video and answer some of the emails. It's a rainy day, there's not a lot going on. I just finished building the Elites. And that answers one of the email questions. When am I going to have Elites back in the store? I just put 6 in the store. I just built 6, excuse me, and I just put them in the store. So if you want one, you better get there because they don't last very long. The Elite actually has turned out to be the most popular stove that I sell. It's also the lightest stove I sell. Now, I've noticed that some people are making videos, as is just human nature, and trying to one-up me and build a lighter stove. But what I've noticed is the people that are building them, they're not putting the inner wall in them. You look at them close and they're just a can with a bunch of holes drilled in them. In fact, when you're looking over the top, you can see the jets from the inside. And you can do that, and once you get them warm and once you get the pot down there, and if you can keep them lit while you get the pot on and get the flames out, they work fine. The problem is that getting the stove hot enough and then getting the pot and getting it to flip over from the flames coming out of the top to coming out the jets is real dicey, and I wouldn't want to do it in anything other than right here on the bench in the shop. It's pretty difficult. Now, to overcome that, I put an inner wall in mine, and that way the gases are expanding between the two walls, and it's pretty easy. You light it, wait 5 seconds, just blow on it lightly. Sometimes it'll blossom by itself, and it'll all blossom out before you put the pot on. And because I'm putting an inner wall in them, I don't need to use a primer wick or a primer pan. So what I'm finding out is the people that are making them and just punching the holes in them because they don't have the technology to put the inner wall in them, and it's pretty tough. I did a video on that. You'll see if you go back to my videos and see when I build Elites. It's pretty tough. Anyway, to overcome that, they're using a primer pan. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but when they weigh them, they don't weigh the primer pan, they just weigh the stove. So you've got to have the primer pan to make the stove work, so it's not really fair to compare that to one of my stoves if you don't weigh everything you need to make it work. So, that's kind of funny. Okay, the next email. I just had Wooden Arrow or something email me and ask me if I planned on making some of the Foster's pots in 16 and 20 ounce now that the Dutch beer can is extinct. The answer to that is no, I'm not going to, because to just take the Foster's can and go from the QMH, which is a fairly rigid little pot because it's so short, and jack it up to 16 or 20 ounces without doing anything to it, it becomes kind of flimsy, and you can wind it with wick, but even then it still flexes, and if it flexes and bends in once, then the wick gets loose and it gets ugly. Another reason is if that pot, 16 or 20 ounce pot, is full of boiling hot water, it's just for that reason, it's just not rigid enough. I wouldn't dare sell that pot to somebody because there's a really good chance of it just folding up on you. I could get by that by doing one of 3 things, none of which I'm going to do. One would be to wrap it right from the top right to the bottom with wick, but that would take 60 feet of wick, and the pot would be, by my standards, would be heavy and just not a good idea. Second is I can put a spine underneath the wick, right where you grab a hold of it. I have done that, but that makes them heavy too, and it's complicated, and it has some rather nasty side effects after you use it a while, so that's not a way I'm going to go. Now, I used to make the 16-ounce pots for Crazy Cooking Kit, I think it was, and what I did with those was I took a can and went up, like yay far, cut it off, then I spiral annealed it all the way around while I spun it, stretched it, and then I took another can and cut it off that long the other way, and slid the one can inside of the other with a bonding agent and made it double walled, and then wrapped it with wick, and even some of those I put a spine in them. And that was not a real durable pot. It didn't wear well. It was fairly heavy. It wasn't warm and fuzzy, just not a good pot. Although none of them ever came back. I just was not happy with the process. When I was putting them together, quite often, probably 1 out of 3 would fail. It would crimp, and I couldn't straighten it back out again. It just wasn't a good system. So to make a long story short, no, I'm not going to make 16 and 20 ounce Foster's pots, and I don't think anybody should because it's just not a good design. So, email number 3. Why don't you sell the rings? If you're not going to sell the pots, sell the rings, we'll make them ourselves. Well, as I just said, I don't think they're safe pots, so I don't want anybody making 16 and 20 ounce. Second off, that ring is fairly difficult to build. I've seen where 4 or 5 different people are building them, and they've got a whole bunch of them hung over their fingers saying, oh, I got all kinds of rings. I think probably if you knew the whole story, having built them for 4 years, and knowing the ins and outs of it, all those ones they've got over their finger, those are the ones that didn't work out. The actual ones that did work out, they've got on a pot and they're using. The chance for failure there, unless you're a skilled machinist and have just the right material and a good lathe, the chance for failure there is huge. When I first started making them, probably 50% of them I spoiled, and the other 50% were okay, but I wasn't real happy with them. They were a little, maybe not quite as tight as I wanted, or a little bit too tight. And I found out in the end, to answer your question why I'm not going to make them, is, and people won't tell you this, especially people that want to sell them to you, is you'll find out that when Tinny makes one, every single one he makes it a little oversized, cuts the can, tries it on, and then turns it down until it just fits the way he wants it to. Because the cans in the process of being made vary 5 to 10 thousandths in diameter from one pot to the next. So if I make any one ring and try it in a series of pots, it's probably going to be too big for some pots. In some other pots, other rings may be a little too small. So I make each one and fit it to each pot. So I can't really start selling these rings to the general public because the pots just vary too much, and I haven't got a number where I'm happy where it fits the big ones and the small ones. And nobody's going to tell you that except Tinny, and that's the reason why I don't sell them. And anybody that sells them to you, it might fit your pot just fine, and might not work at all. It might be too loose and come right out. In that case, you probably could shim it, or it may be too big. And lastly, putting these rings into pots is not for the raw amateur. It can be rather complicated. When I first started out, I was spoiling 3 or 4 cans before I got one in, and over the years, I learned the technique and learned to make them for each pot and got them so they could fit. But I think if you had one of the rings that I make right now and went to put in a pot, you'd go, wow, that's not anything like I thought it was going to be. It's a lot tougher. So that's the answer to that. So I'm not going to sell the pots because they're real flimsy, flat-sided things, and it's just not a good idea. And I'm not going to sell the rings because I make them, every one, to fit each pot as I make it. Now I know somebody's going to say, oh, that's just baloney. There ain't no more to it. Well, you can say that. You can try to make old Tinny look bad. But I've been making them for quite a few years. I've made hundreds of them, maybe thousands of them. And that's the truth. Yeah, let's go take a look at inventory and see how those pots are selling. Now, 3 days ago, I was sold out, so I built 7 QMH. That was 3 days ago, and I have 2, 4, 6. So that means in the last 3 days I've sold 1. Wow, those are a hot seller, aren't they? So I'm Tinny from Mini Bull Design. Get out and hike, take a friend, enjoy the great outdoors, and more important than anything, try to be nice, leave no trace, and have a really great day. Bye-bye.